Good afternoon. Thank you for joining. I'm Scott Griffith, SVP of Global Innovation at MarketForce. Today we'll be taking a look at the results of a consumer sentiment study MarketForce completed last week. I'm joined by Dr. Phil Dorio, Vice President of Analytics and Insights, and Brad Christian, Managing Director. Let's jump right in. We started this process back at the end of March and got into field with the study in April. And we're on our second wave of the study now. So Brad, if you want to just go forward, we'll take a look at our agenda for today. And we'll tell you a little bit about the study before we kick in. Because it's been a longitudinal study, we'll look at what's changed. So what's happening in the marketplace between April and now. And that's going to allow us to set some business expectations in terms of how people expect to be visiting retail and restaurant locations and what their spend looks like going forward. We'll look at some of the drivers of success, what's really important to these consumers. And then ultimately at the end, we'll wrap up with what's next and what you can kind of take action on today to be prepared for this new reality that we're in. So with that, in terms of the study itself, it was fielded between May 6th and 8th. And again, that's wave 2. And we talked to about 4,000 people. We've got a little bit of a skew to female versus male. The household income skews above 50K. And we've got a wide cross-section of age groups. So we talked to a lot of people to create a representative sample. And that's allowed us to kind of take a look at the study and say, okay, between wave 1 and wave 2, how are people's minds and perceptions changing? And Phil, I think you can shed some light on that for us. So why don't you just jump in and take over?
Great, thanks, Scott. Just as a reminder, everyone, even though I'm going to hit some highlights for changes from wave 1 to wave 2 here in just the next couple of minutes, the full report will be available after the webinar today in the coming days. And there's obviously lots more detail with respect to what we're tracking, what's changed over time. But here comes a few of the highlights. So probably the first one is no big surprise to anyone who's sitting on the webinar today. Everyone feels like the stir craziness is setting in, or at least we're beginning to see that with a significant downturn in terms of the belief from the consumers that we talk to with respect to whether or not they feel like they need to continue to shelter in place or stay at home. We see that number falling from 80% down to 68%. The interesting kind of wrinkle behind this is that there's still quite a bit of ambivalence with respect to how the world's going to be changing and so forth. We're seeing an increasing percentage in terms of the number of consumers who are saying to us they feel like the world is going to be significantly changed coming out of this, and that likewise they will be changing their behavior as a result of that. So even though everybody wants to get out of the house, or we're beginning to really see that that sort of shift, there's some ambivalence with respect to what's to be expected once we're out there and whether or not we'll be changing our behavior as consumers. Secondly, and we saw this in the first wave, and it's really more resonant even in this second wave, is the credit that local businesses are getting for doing right by their customers with respect to safety. Much more so than large national chains, local businesses are being given great credit by consumers for their attempts to keep them safe. There's essentially a 10-point gap here in terms of the comparison between the national chains, which are at around 31% top box satisfaction with this safety measure, and local businesses, which are at 41%. And I would say the opportunity here, obviously, is for national chains really to communicate the local aspect of their business. Management and operations are almost certainly local. Community support and those sorts of things, very important to create this sense of localness, if you will, with consumers that are being served. And then obviously the safety procedures and so forth that we all are so cognizant of today. Okay. Also shifting here is the opportunity for QSRs specifically. About 30% of consumers who are trying a new QSR in the last couple of weeks as we're doing this data collection, and folks are starting to get out of their house a little bit. The choice of a second restaurant came about because the original choice was still closed. So opportunity there too, as we're carefully reopening locations and so on, is to do that and make consumers aware. A couple of secondary reasons for choice here with a second restaurant have to do with the perception of a location being a little less busy, so more opportunity for that distance measure to continue to happen for consumers. And then thirdly, important here is the aspect of curbside and drive-through, and interestingly now surfacing contactless delivery, contactless transactions, and so forth. So the payment at length or without physical contact becoming more important. Okay. We also, in the last measure, asked about family meals. Certainly, there's more emphasis and focus on dining in, so preparing food, and we're going to talk about grocery here in just a moment and opportunities there. But for QSRs and for casual restaurants, they're surfaced in the first measure a real desire from consumers to see family meals. And so in this second wave, we continue to ask questions about family meals and actually ask a few additional ones. QSRs have really upped their game with respect to family meal offers in this second go round. Although casual dining still leads in terms of satisfaction with family meals and so forth. The interesting thing here is when a consumer says to us, we'd like to have be able to do family meals, we're not particularly satisfied with the choices. More often than not, it's either because the menu item that they're looking for is not offered in a package in a family meal, or the family meal that has those menu items that they're interested in come in a size that is too large or doesn't fit their family for some sort of reason. So scalability with respect to family meals is something that really represents an opportunity for both QSRs and casual dining. Now I'm going to turn things over to Brad and let him talk about expectations for the verticals, what we're seeing in terms of rebound and so forth going forward, and how brands can really drive that success. Brad?
Hey, so thanks, Phil. So, as both Scott and Phil have talked about, this is the second wave of our study, and we've continued to evolve the survey to dig into topics and help our understanding, as well as work with our clients to help give them some guidance coming out of COVID-19. And so one of the things we wanted to understand from our consumer base was talk to us a little bit about what your behaviors were 3 months before COVID-19, during COVID-19 and the shelter-in-place requirements, and then kind of what do you think you're going to be doing when we have things more under control. And so the first category we looked at was grocery, and just to give some context to this slide, people reported to us that they were going to the grocery store about 85 times a year. And they've suggested that has fallen off dramatically during the pandemic, and that makes sense. We also see that while trip quantities are down, basket size is certainly up as people stock up for the uncertainty of when they're going to get back to a store again. But I think the concerning thing is that the reported trip counts are not going to get to pre-pandemic levels. In fact, they'll be down by about 22%. So that's a little bit of a concern, obviously, for everybody in the supermarket space. To try to give that some context and sort of establish a so what, one of the things that Phil and his team have done from a modeling perspective is try to quantify if we're going to be losing trips, if we're going to be losing to competition. And one of the things that we learned in wave one is the fact that about 1 out of every 5 consumers is trying a different brand for various reasons. But there's about a plus or minus 6% flux in same-store sales opportunity that is available to the brands that optimize their execution during this time and coming out of the pandemic. But what it is we found consumers are looking for is better stock levels. So they're going places, they're not finding what they're looking for, and they're choosing another brand to try. I'll certainly spare you the toilet paper joke here. But the other thing that's interesting is the less busy concept. And this doesn't necessarily mean fewer people in the store, although it's not necessarily not that fact. But it's also about how well does the brand bring people into the store, cue them through the store, and exit them out of the retailer to give a sense of, hey, this place is organized, it's safe, I'm comfortable here. That's really important to consumers. And then the other thing is just the obvious and overt cleaning standards that are in place. I'll give you a personal example, my study sample size of 1. I've been to a number of grocery chains here in my local market, and 2 stand out as being really buttoned up in terms of having somebody in the lobby, wiping down carts, wiping down hand baskets, being very, very visible to the consumer, and that's Publix and Target. I've been to others that aren't doing that, but we believe that those kinds of overt gestures will pay dividends with consumer trust. So that's what people are looking for. What people are worried about and what's driving potential switching behaviors is poor cleanliness. So when we're not providing that cleaning standard, or we're not visible in our cleaning efforts, that's got a material impact on people's propensity to switch to another brand, followed by the too crowded notion. So those are the things that are important for supermarket operators to take away from our second wave. Casual dining, on the other hand, is similar, and that is that the annual trip rates are lower than grocery, but they've fallen off. I said casual dining, I apologize. I meant QSR. 76 per year down to 49 per year, and so we're going to see coming out of the pandemic about a 17% decline. So unlike grocery, QSR has some different attributes. What are consumers looking for? Well, first of all, they're looking for a convenient location. So are you close to where they are? And then what wasn't true in grocery and did show up in QSR was value for the dollar. We're comfortable and confident to predict to you that as businesses open up, there will be a plethora of LTOs and promotional offers to try to draw consumers into their restaurants. And so that's going to be important. I think the third thing here is the notion of contactless pickup, contactless drive-through. And I can, again, using my personal example, there's a very popular QSR that I visited about 3 weeks into the pandemic. And I was a little stunned being in the customer experience industry. It resonated with me quickly that they had done nothing to take into consideration that there was an issue with a virus. And I was actually a little taken aback. However, 3 weeks later, that very same business and that very same location had adopted completely contactless methodologies. And so our consumers are telling us that ability to deliver that kind of experience is going to be important. And what we see in the QSR space is what I'll call a plus or minus 4% sales revenue opportunity. What are consumers switching over? Well, again, poor cleanliness. But if you remember on the grocery visualization, it was 0.12. QSR, this is even more impactful with a 0.39. And then the other thing that wasn't on grocery that is with QSR is the value. So having something that people can perceive as a value is going to be really important. And if you don't have that value play, you run the risk of folks trying competition. Again, about 20% of our sample are actively trying different brands during this time. Casual dining is kind of the interesting story here, kind of the good news story in a way. Again, lower trips during the year, really punished for during the pandemic, less than half, but a nice rebound all the way back up to 45. So you're really only looking at a 6% decline in trip counts, which I'm sure is music to many of their ears. There's almost like grocery, there's a 5.7% swing in terms of plus or minus sales opportunity. And what is it that casual dining consumers are looking for? Well, thing one, it's convenient location, which is just like QSR, value for the dollar, and curbside pickup and the ability to execute that consistently well. Really important for people. And then the things that are also enhancing those opportunities, as we see in casual dining, is the notion you getting positive reviews on social media. Many people are shelter in place, they're at home, they're on their mobile devices. So looking at social media is higher now. And so positive references there, really important. And I'll say the other thing that came up is interpersonal recommendations. So I can just tell you from my perspective, one of my neighbors was standing amongst 5 or 6 of us here in the neighborhood the other day and bragging about what a great value they got for X price point. They got this, and this, and it fed a family of 5. So there was a wonderful advertisement for that brand who had come up with a really compelling value offer for during this time. And so there was a wonderful free infomercial across those various neighbors of mine. So brands that are clever in how they do that are going to win. And I can also tell you in terms of a few of our clients have actually been incredibly talented in developing clever ideas, one of which was a drink mix package. So here's the alcohol, here's the drink mix, here's the ingredients, and here's like a packet of information on how to make the beverage. You can actually buy that on one casual dining's chain's website. And they've even shared with us that they're selling kegs at retail, and they were sort of surprised and delighted that they were seeing turns on that inventory. And so they're being very creative. And so the marketplace is going to reward people that are being thoughtful. And I guess the other thing that I didn't mention with regard to curbside pickup is being really good with your technology, making sure that you have a frictionless mobile app or online ordering experience for guests to leverage.
Yeah, we do really see people excited to get back out and into casual dining environments. And definitely, Brad, thanks for sharing the comments around convenience and value, because the brands that are really putting together nice offers, whether it be family meals or just individual meals, are going to see the traffic as the traffic rebounds. And we did talk about cleanliness quite a bit, and in grocery, casual dining, and QSR, cleanliness matters more than ever. Like, we're seeing that as a major swing variable right now. Locations that have really figured this out and are doing a great job in terms of demonstrating that their employees have great hygiene, their uniforms are clean, they're taking all of those necessary measures with masks and gloves and plexi shields, etc., the contactless approach that they're employing. These are all really important because they're pushing likely to recommend with a greater force than ever before. In grocery, that positive halo around cleanliness leads to a 30% boost in likely to recommend right now, which, normally there's an effect, but not that kind of effect. This is very, very exaggerated right now. In QSR, it's a 15% boost. And in casual dining, right now, it's an 8% boost, but I think that's a temporary number because casual dining really hasn't opened yet. And when they do open, you're going to have people and patrons in those restaurants exploring the different brands and seeing how they're deploying these different practices and policies. And I think there's a lot of blue ocean there for people to take advantage of being a front runner here and doing a really nice job, because we've already seen the impact that has in grocery stores and QSRs that are still open. So the casual dining companies that get ahead of this are going to do quite well.
Yeah, Scott, I think, everything we're talking about here really boils down to building consumer trust, and the brands that invest today in all the various things that are going to create trust are going to win those flux numbers that we talked about, and the brands that are slow to adopt are not. And I think the notion of building trust is really going to be an important driver. And for those of you on the webinar, Market Force is a provider of mystery shopping services, and we're one of the largest, if not the largest, here in North America. But we have heard loudly and clearly from our client base that they need help in this regard. And so we've actually developed a very specific and targeted service for our client base that we're referring to as brand trust audits. This is not a traditional mystery shop where we're checking on speed of service and order accuracy and whether we got greeted or not. These are all COVID considerations. This is the mechanism that brands can use to inspect what you expect. Mark Cuban just recently conducted a study as Texas reopened across retailers and restaurants, and the pass rates were really poor. Brands are struggling to reopen effectively, and so having people in the locations to give feedback on face masks and gloves, plexiglass, whether cleaning practices are visible and being conducted, whether hand sanitizer is present. I had a client just yesterday tell me that they keep putting out hand sanitizer and it keeps getting stolen. So it's clear that this is a really hot commodity that consumers value. So we don't have best practices on how to cable strap those to the door, but we can tell you that that's really going to matter to consumers. And so the notion of having 15 questions, a couple of digital pictures, being engaged in your stores as they reopen state by state with kind of a hot alert mechanism so that you know when something isn't being done right so you can get in front of it faster is going to help compel your execution and then ultimately build trust with your guests and your consumer base. So this was what we wanted to share with you today. We have some resources. One is this study that we're doing is an ongoing study. We have had some clients say to us, we'd like to conduct one that's just specific to our brand. If that's an area of interest, we'd certainly be happy to hear from you and conduct a bespoke custom version for you. I mentioned brand trust audits. If that's an area of interest, let us know. The other thing that we're talking with companies about is what we're referring to as the relaunch strategy. Whatever business plan got published in December of 2019 for 2020, you can put that one in the bin. The new reality is very uncertain, but having some best practices developed from working across a number of brands and also getting insight into what consumers are expecting is something we're consulting our existing client base. Scotty, what else would you add?
Yeah, in terms of the resources, we've got resources available, everything from restaurant associations, the CDC, some of the grocery associations on what those standards are. And that's a lot of what's informed the brand trust audit, so that you can deploy those types of resources, materials, audits, checklists at scale quickly. And I think that's the big ticket item right now. It's at scale quickly, because the impact that these factors in terms of cleanliness are having on guests are immediate and apparent, and they're causing the switching behavior. So if you think that, oh, we might need that and we might, think about doing that, there's not a lot of time. There's not a lot of time to spare between, reopening, being effective, and winning or losing customers. So I'd encourage those who are kind of thinking about this to start to talk to us quickly, so that you can think about putting this in field quickly, because it really is it's a pivot point in your year's financial outcomes right now.
Well said.
So thank you very much. We appreciate you spending some time with us today. There'll be availability of the full study as well to those who get in touch. So by all means, get in touch, reach out. We'd love to talk to you about any of these topics and what's going on in your business right now. So Brad, do you want to close out with anything else?
No, I was going to just see if there were any questions coming in from the audience that we can answer. So Phil, looks like, I think this is for you. What is the specific analytics practice that you use to derive these kinds of flux insights, especially around like the same store sales changes by industry?
Sure. We're deploying obviously questions that have to do with the consumer's intended behavior in the coming future, and then mapping that onto what we know about the industry's financial performance on specific brands as well. And we use a predictive framework that takes advantage of collinearity in the places where it makes sense, because a number of these elements are related to one another, but then also ring fences it and keeps it out of creating chaos with respect to some of the leverages that we come up with. So we're essentially building a forecast given intended behavior along with what we know is happening and has historically happened in a particular industry or with a brand to build the sort of forecast in terms of flux that we are recording here.
Thank you everyone for dialing in and joining us this afternoon. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.